It's late December 1941 in the White House, long after the corridors have settled into silence. Winston Churchill steps out of a warm bath and crosses the bedroom with a cigar in his hand. The war in Europe weighs on him, and it shows in the way he moves. Then he stops walking. A man stands by the fireplace. Tall, still, dressed in a dark coat. He doesn't speak or move. He simply watches the Prime Minister with a calm presence, as though he stepped out of another time. Churchill recognises him at once. It's Abraham Lincoln. According to later accounts repeated by White House staff, Churchill reportedly says, "Good evening, Mr. President. You appear to have me at a disadvantage." A moment later, the figure's gone. Churchill sits heavily on the edge of the bed with the cigar forgotten in his hand and wonders whether he's seen a ghost or whether he ought to ease up on the champagne. He's not the only one who claims an encounter here, and he's not the first. Welcome back to the channel. In this episode, we're going to look at the haunting of Abraham Lincoln, the grief he'd carried in life, the sightings reported after his death, and the long tradition of people who claim they've seen his ghost in the White House. Long before he became president, Abraham Lincoln carries the marks of sorrow. Friends speak of long spells of quiet reflection that settle over him without warning. In his photographs, there's a weight in his expression, a sense of someone who's known hardship and spends most of his time in the company of his own thoughts. He grows up surrounded by loss, and he reads poetry that lingers on memory and the passing of life. Those influences follow him into adulthood and into public life, shaping the way people remember him. When he enters the White House in 1861, he's already burdened by a country coming apart, and he moves through the early months of his presidency with the tired determination of someone who understands the scale of what lies ahead. He works late into the night and walks the corridors while news from the front shifts endlessly between hope and despair. Those close to him notice the strain and sense in him an awareness that something darker is drawing closer. The country's deep in crisis, and a far more personal loss is about to fall across his family. In February 1862, the White House becomes a place of deep concern. Lincoln's son Willie, only 11 years old, falls seriously ill. The president stays close to the boy's bedside whenever duty allows, and Mary Lincoln refuses to leave the room, holding on to the belief that he'll recover. On February 20th, Willie dies, and the stillness that follows spreads through the house like a shockwave. Mary withdraws into grief, unable to face visitors or public duties. Lincoln returns to his work because the war presses on without mercy, but staff later recall seeing him pause outside Willie's room late at night, standing quietly as though he's unsure whether to go inside. The White House feels suddenly larger and emptier, and the sense of loss lingers in every corridor, refusing to release its hold on the family. In the days that follow, Mary Lincoln starts saying that she can see Willie. She describes him standing at the foot of her bed, speaking with her gently as though he hadn't left at all. These accounts don't come from distant memory, but from the immediacy of that grief, recorded by her dressmaker, Elizabeth Keckley. Keckley's memoir preserves Mary's exact words. She writes, "He comes to me every night and stands at the foot of my bed with the same sweet, adorable smile he always had." At the time Mary starts speaking of seeing Willie, the country's in the middle of a much wider cultural movement. Spiritualism's extremely popular in the 1850s and 60s. It begins with the Fox sisters in New York in 1848 and quickly spreads across the United States and Europe. This isn't fringe behaviour. Half the country was doing the same thing. Some out of curiosity, most out of grief. And of course, the Civil War accelerates this interest. Hundreds of thousands of families receive no final message from loved ones, and many never recover the bodies of those who die far from home. For many households, seances become a normal part of coping with loss. Mary Lincoln is no exception. She turns to mediums for that same reason many other bereaved parents do at the time. She's looking for reassurance and any form of connection to the child she's lost. She later attends seances in Washington and continues to seek messages from Willie after she leaves the White House. She's not the only one in the house who senses something beyond the ordinary. Lincoln's relationship with dreams grows more pronounced during the pressures of the war. He speaks of images that seem to carry symbolic meaning. Ward Hill Lamon later claims that Lincoln described a dream of a ship moving steadily across dark waters, a sign he believed carried national importance. Historians approached Lamon's recollection cautiously, but the story remains part of the tradition surrounding Lincoln's later years. Mary also recalls an evening when Lincoln sees two reflections of himself in a mirror and takes the doubled image as an omen. The story reflects the atmosphere of foreboding that surrounds the family during that period. Lincoln sleeps little and walks the upper corridors late into the night, weighed down by the demands of a nation in turmoil. Then, in April 1865, he's assassinated at Ford's Theatre, and the White House falls into a silence that feels different from anything that's come before. It marks the end of his life, but not the end of the stories connected to him. In the decades that follow, early accounts of Lincoln's presence start to emerge from White House staff. Guards and attendants speak of footsteps heard in an empty hallway, or of a tall figure glimpsed at a distance before fading from view. Others mention the faint sensation of someone passing by, as though brushed by fabric in a quiet corridor. Grace Coolidge, who serves as First Lady in the 1920s, later writes that she once saw Lincoln standing at a window, looking out across the grounds with a quiet stillness. Her words aren't preserved verbatim, but the impression she describes adds to the growing pattern of sightings of him. As administrations come and go, the stories continue, and they gather new meaning during moments of national strain. Churchill's reported encounter becomes one of the most frequently repeated accounts in the House's history. Staff pass along the story from one administration to the next, and historians include it in collections of White House folklore. His experience stands out because of who he is and the burden he carries, but it isn't the only story from the years of the Second World War that keeps this tradition alive. During the Second World War, Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands stays at the White House as a guest. According to later accounts, she hears a knock at her door late one night. When she opens it, she sees a tall man in a dark coat standing in the corridor, a figure she recognizes Abraham Lincoln. The story goes that she collapses from shock. Now, she's living in the White House because her country is under German occupation. She's a head of state in exile, separated from her people and carrying the uncertainty of a nation displaced. Under those conditions, anyone would jump at a knock on the door, especially one from a past president. No exact words from the Queen survive, but the event becomes one of the most widely repeated accounts of the Lincoln sightings. Other visitors and residents offer their own stories in the years that follow. The figure they describe is always similar, tall, quiet and watchful, as though connected not to the living world, but to the memory of the house itself. Lincoln's leadership during the Civil War, combined with his assassination, fixes his presence to the White House in a way that shapes how later generations view the building itself. Some presidents fade from memory the moment they leave office. Lincoln never does, and the stories follow that pattern. Many of the sightings take place in rooms connected to his work and his personal life. The Lincoln bedroom, for example, stands above the office where he read reports from the front. The Yellow Oval Room was where he received news that shaped the direction of the war. People who walk through these spaces often speak of an atmosphere that feels deeper and heavier than the rest of the house. The quiet of the White House settles again as the night deepens. In one of the guest rooms, Winston Churchill sits alone after his encounter, trying to make sense of what he's just seen. The cigar in his hand has gone cold, and the warmth from the bath has long faded. but he remains seated, studying the space where the figure stood only moments before. In the end, the stories endure because the history behind them endures. Lincoln's life, his loss, his leadership in the darkest years of the nation, and the way all of it settled into the walls of the house give these sightings a sense of depth that feels rooted in something real. People who stay in the White House often say that the past doesn't feel distant. It feels close, as though it's still unfolding just beyond the edge of a present moment. And somewhere within its quiet corridors, Abraham Lincoln remains part of that unfinished story. So let me know in the comments below what you thought of this story. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe, and even consider becoming a channel member. I'll see you next time.